Okay. So our big question for today is a little bit of an abstract question. How does art reflect cultural ideals? And you can type this in the chat box or on the slide. So this is kind of like, how does art reflect culture, which is a very open question, but also how does art reflect the ideals within a culture? So if you can think about what are cultural ideals, and then how does art show that? Yeah, sometimes we use it to make a point, for sure. Excellent feedback, Graceland. Hello, Elizabeth and Elon. Welcome. We are opening with the question of, how does art reflect cultural ideals? Hi. It's simple to come up with, I think, how art reflects culture, but the ideal within the culture, which we all have ideals that I think are agreed upon. Okay, welcome. Well, I'm glad you're here. Let me know if this question gives you any thoughts. Once again, it's an opinion question, so you don't have to, you can answer part of it too. I see Elizabeth's writing. We can move on after her response. Artists use symbolism and imagery to represent their cultural ideals. Totally. So that's going to be a common tool that we see. We've already seen it a lot happen in art, and it will kind of never go away. So this is our focal work of the week. You guys, I think, have already seen this piece in another lesson. But we'll start with, what questions do you have about the work we're looking at? There's a storm coming right over my house right now. The dog is worried. Sorry. Let me just close that door. All right, go on now. It's okay. It's okay. Ooh, is that a Nike? Yes, it is. What is the meaning of it? Ooh, that's the big one. So, like in all works, there's layers of meaning here. I would say, and we'll get into that in just a second too, but I would say that the meaning is, largely symbolic not only of how the Greeks were encountering war, but also sort of a war that was happening with themselves. This piece is not in the prow of a ship, but I do think I know what you're talking about. This piece was very heavy marble, and it was actually stationary, and people traveled to it. So, now I will turn on my webcam, and I will spill the tea on this piece. Let me hit the video button. As always, if the image is too small, better angle right here. Right here. If the image is too small, you can pull this box down and expand it. I know based on our signal, your image might be clearer than some people's might be less clear. The tea I'm drinking today is Earl Grey with lavender. It's an interesting combination. You're both stimulated and tired at the same time. Okay. Yeah, you were, okay, cool. So this piece, Nike of Samothrace, or technically it kind of rhymes the name, Nike of Samothraki. Nike of Samothrace was a statue that people traveled to see when they were trying to prepare for war. And this is on a famous island that was only a devotional island off the coast of Greece. So meaning the only people that could live there were essentially a few priests and caretakers. Other than that, the island was supposed to be inhabited by the gods. And there were several temples all around, but this piece is outside the temple. She stands out in the open. Right. So she was a Greek goddess of victory. So can you guess who might go and travel to her? Commanders, right. So normally your war generals were traveling to see her. So going along with this, what did you have to do in the ancient world to have the gods hear your prayer? You had to give up something. What was that? Sacrifices, right. And it was believed the larger the task, the larger the sacrifice. So say you ask a small favor of the gods. You don't have a lot of money, you need something small. What kind of animal would you sacrifice? Birds or mice often were a pretty common sacrifice at the time. And what kind of animal would you sacrifice for something big like a war? Bulls, right, especially bulls. Bulls also had a lot of meaning at this time too, because the bull often represented which god? Zeus, right. So the bull especially, not necessarily the cow, but the bull did. So you would sacrifice the bull. And the architecture of this piece right here, Nike of Samothrace was sitting kind of out in the open, and then you would walk up to what looks like 30 to 50 steps leading up to this statue. And each of the steps had a very slight curve in the back of each step. And this, yes, thank you, and this curve was actually designed for the flow of blood, believe it or not. So the ancient Greeks even had the darker side of sacrifice in mind in their architecture. Right. And it was all about the spectacle as well, because the commander never went alone. He always had a retinue of soldiers behind him, and what happened would be that how well the sacrifice took place, the story of if it was received, was supposed to be viewed and witnessed by others so they can share throughout the camp. And the commanders had really good knowledge of superstition and how it can hurt or help a soldier in war. So if the soldier believed it was preordained by the gods that they would win, they knew that they would actually fight better because they believed they would come out successful. But if they were heard that there was a negative sacrifice at all, they would obviously go into battle already thinking that they're going to die, which is a whole different mindset. So speaking of going to die, this piece right here, Nike of Samothrace, is incredibly detailed. Yeah, some of the costumes for sure, and the customs. So looking at this piece right here, we're getting into sort of a custom and costume at the same time in ancient Greece. This is in an era called Hellenism, which I'll write right here so you can see. Hellenism was seen as the high point of Greek art. You guys looked at the Mask of Agamemnon from way early Greek work. That's 1,000 to 2,000 years difference between that point in Greek history to this point in Hellenistic history. This is shortly before Rome takes over Greece, to give you some context. Hellenism was the height of Greek work. This is the work that we look at today as being just pure mastery. And in the Hellenistic world, we had a lot of drama happening here. We can see here, if you look at Nike's body right here, you can still see basically what's going on underneath the clothes. And that's because of the Greek custom. Now, if you were a hero in a Greek story, an ancient Greek story, the men would always appear as naked. And the philosophy was that a true hero needs nothing to defend themselves from the elements. So if you see ancient Greek statues that are naked, that's always a hero from a story, just to give yourself some context. Rome had different rules, but this was the ancient Greek rules. Now, if you're a woman, women were supposed to be interior, they were protected, they could not show their wares to the world. So the female hero or heroine had to follow different rules. And this right here, over to the left, is your artist kind of working within and without the culture. They want to show their mastery and their skill. They want to show how beautiful they believe Nike was, as in legend she was supposed to be gorgeous. And they wanted to respect her body, but they also had to respect the custom that she couldn't appear naked or fully naked. So instead, what your sculptor did was they took all this cloth and linens and they soaked them in water and then got their model, because they have to obviously look at a person as they're preparing for this work of art. They got their model to wrap the fabric around themselves so that it would stick, which is why if you look closely, you can even see her navel, her belly button on the statue from this angle. And that's because the sculpture or the image that this was based on, they wrapped the model in fabric. Cool, thank you. So this was a really interesting time. Now, why did Hellenism exist? What got us to this point in art history in which all of a sudden artists were so incredibly meticulously detailed? And what we believe happened was actually a plague had taken over Greece. About a third of the population had died. And there was a whole bunch of pain going around, shared pain amongst the community. And so they invested a lot more money into their faith, so their gods and goddesses, their temples, into their form of work. They had a much higher standard all of a sudden for what was required. But it's even said that the Hellenistic artists were in so much emotional pain from seeing, 1 out of 3 people that they knew who had died, that they would spend hours and hours and hours working and creating these gods and goddesses to make them look like they are really there. In this statue, she's slightly larger than life. So imagine she's like a 6 or 7 foot tall woman, not the average height, which was 5'3" back then. Yeah, that's an interesting statistic right there. Over time, women have only grown an inch since the early man state, whereas men, they say, have grown an average of 5 inches since early man. And that's like super back and forth there. But yeah, women have mostly stayed closer to the same size, right? Yeah, what's with that? So anyway, Nike Samothrace, she's exposed to the elements. She's on top of the steps. You can actually look up Samothraki, the island here. That refers to that spiritual island that they're on. And you can see recreationist videos and stuff of the actual setup. You can still visit Samothraki today if you go to Greece. Okay, so Nike Samothrace, you can always tell it's a Greek work by A, the women have to be clothed, or how they get away with it is the classic washerwoman scene. So it's the scene in which, like, you stumbled across a woman as she's like trying to bathe or take off their clothes. That's how they got away with it a lot too and allowed it. So every time you see a washerwoman scene, they're trying to show the feminine form, but also fit in cultural parameters. Greek works are masterfully made, but not masterfully engineered. The Romans, we'll see in a later piece, the Romans are incredibly practical people, and if they knew that an arm or a leg would fall off eventually, they would literally stick a piece of wood in there to hold it up. They didn't care how beautiful it was. It had to be practical. The ancient Greeks would never do that. That's like completely against the artistic ideal there. They would instead just carve it as is, understanding that maybe in 100 years or so, the arms and the head will fall off. And that's what we believe what happened over here. It's a pretty clean break. at the head and the arms. And we just believe that they have basically fallen off and were lost to time in that way. Imagine also falling off from the height that she's at. It would probably smash, for sure. Okay, so that's my tea. That's my gossip about this piece. We'll move on to the next slide here. Okay, so I have right here a video link that's about the carving process. The second link down here, if you can click on that, it should open up for you. And I invite you to type while you watch. So as you're watching and something comes to mind that's surprising about the process of carving, write it down in the box here below. I believe everyone has writing privileges. So let's see, how long is this video? Let me open it to you. It's going to start playing in a second. I'll try and pause it. All right, the video is only 2 minutes and 40 seconds, so hopefully people have already started. I'm going to start a timer for 2 minutes. And if you finish before then, just give me a green check to know that you're done. There are so many types of chisels. Yes. All right. So thank you, Graceland, for your comment. Elizabeth or Elon, did you find any surprises from this video? Yeah, that's very true. Tools really haven't changed that much. And I think that also speaks to the fact that there's only so many ways you can carve. Yeah, definitely. And that also, I feel like that's something that we also see from any expert. It's like when you watch the Olympics, that you don't really recognize how fast they're running because you don't have a metric yet of a standard person who would run by the people who are racing. In the same way, the people who are really skilled just make it look so smooth and easy. And they're really practicing how to hit it. And that really just comes with practice. There's only, you can, obviously there's thousands of ways to learn from other teachers, but some of that comes naturally as you're playing around with your own chisels and trying to hit through different kinds of rocks. Okay, So in terms of our current cultural ideals, I want to ask you guys, are there any sculptures that we can put on the board? And this is something that you can copy paste from a website in our Google Images and look over here. I will do this as well. You might have to think of a cultural ideal, and then you can use some Google search terms to find something. Oh, Google. I found an obvious one I can post. Oh, it's super big, sorry. I'm going to make it smaller. So this is the obvious one. So perhaps one cultural ideal that we have in the U.S. is our history and definitely patriotism that comes to mind with this. Definitely. It can definitely be a statue. That's one of those things too. Sculpture and statue have a lot in common. Technically, a statue is within the sculpture realm. Oh, very cool. So Graceland, what do you think, how do you think this represents a cultural ideal in our country? Does it remind you of something that we value here? Or maybe Elon and Elizabeth can also give some feedback onto these pieces too. Does anything make you think of something that we value in our country, in our culture? I was able to just copy paste from my web page, but you can also download it to your desktop and hit the Load Content button in the upper right corner, and that'll let you paste it on there too. Ooh. Well, that's an interesting piece. Breaking from the mold. I definitely agree with that as being one of our ideals. But to be unique too kind of comes with its own sort of heaviness here. You can be unique, but only so unique in our country. And that's, that changes with every generation as to how unique you're allowed to be. And also sometimes from each city or subculture. These are great ones, guys. Okay. Give me a check if you guys feel like you're ready to move on to the next slide. Awesome. Okay, so I invite you to write on the board for this one. All sculptors, as we know from what we've seen, spend a lot of time creating their work. And they want you to feel a certain way. They want the viewer to feel a certain way when they're looking at a piece. So I found two very different sculptures for you. If you guys can write just some instinctual feelings you get when you look at this. I think everything here is purposeful. With the rocks that they chose to work from, what kind of material they chose to work with. So give me some really, it can be one or two words, base feelings that you get when you look at something like this. One more. Yeah, I definitely see that too. This is an old school strategy right here to our right. This is especially known in the ancient Greek world, but also to today. The idea that in order to show how strong you are, you must show an even stronger opponent that you overcame. Meaning that in these famous battles where you'd see men fight against monsters from the wild, which at this point the lions were considered a monster in the ancient world, they would show the lion being at its strongest and most muscular and things like that. So the right side here, you want to feel on edge and tense and wild, like he's really there, and they want you to put yourself in the viewpoint of the hero, which would be the one defending himself from the monster. And over to the left too, we can see they've even chose this like warm color scheme going on here in the paint. And they want you to praise the God. They definitely, this person does seem to radiate power with these power postures that we're looking at as well. Great work, guys. Okay, so we have another video clip right here for you and 3 questions on the board. And this is the process and how Nike was developed into the symbol. It's really short video. It's just a few visuals here. But I want you guys to interpret from that video what was happening. How did Nike get, how were they inspired by the statue that we saw above? The Nike brand versus Nike statue. Mm-hmm. Cool. You guys nailed it. Yeah, so surprise, surprise, Nike, the brand, was inspired by the Nike statue when it came up to their original image. Nike was also represented by bird, I think. I forget which bird it was. Was it a goose? I can't quite remember. But it was said that when the bird flew over a battle scene, a swan, thank you, that's right. That when a bird flew over a battle scene, that was Nike in her mortal form. So you guys have it. Like, her wings are definitely the strongest aspect, also the thing that happened to survive over time. So good job, original sculptor, for building those solid wings. Victory or rising above the best. And they definitely borrowed from her spread wings. And you can actually do this now if you hold your arm out kind of backwards in that wing. You can feel the check coming from your own chest and out to your arm. I'll do it in the video here. So how I was always told to look at it was if you're holding your arm out like a wing, the check comes from her breast and her chest up through her arm. So the swoosh. And you saw how originally she had the wings were even attached to the swoosh. And they modified that for the more modern shape. Excellent. It was even said that the direction that the swans were flying was a sign as to who was going to win or which side of the battle. Okay, so we know a lot about this Nike of Samothrace race, or Nike of Samothrace. If someone can describe the style and someone describe the process of what we're looking at, of this original piece. Thank you. Excellent. Does anyone else have anything to add before we move on? Thank you, Elizabeth. Give me a green check if we're ready to move on to the next slide. Excellent. Okay, so I know it's been a little bit. We haven't looked at these works in a couple weeks. But let's compare and contrast these two works right here. The Gates of Ishtar, which if you reach back it might already be in your long-term memory, but if you reach back into there, just tell me how Gates of Ishtar is different from the Nike of Samothrace in the same way. Excellent, and what they have in common. We already have that on there. Elizabeth has it going. Yeah, two pretty goddesses. Let's see, Elizabeth is helping us out a lot. Graceland and Elon, do you guys want to help us out on the gates of Ishtar side? Tell us how they're different. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's an excellent one there. Graceland hit the nail on the head with the gates of Ishtar. Yeah, I would say one is much more religion focused than the other. Like the other is also definitely a representation of a person's wealth, but no one owns Samothrace. So the Nike of Samothrace is truly just a religious figure here. Yeah, intimidation of regular people, for sure. Regular people couldn't even stay in Samothrace. Hitting the nails on the head. Good job, guys. If y'all can give me a check if we're ready to move on. Ooh. Kingdom. Awesome. Ah, we get you there. It looks like it's over the middle to me. Okay. So in this last bit here, if you guys could each come up with some way that you think this piece could have impacted the art world. And remember, this was on a public island that wasn't owned by anyone, which means a lot of people visited this island for a long time. So your ancient Romans had come to visit. Your Egyptians even came to visit, your more modern Egyptian. And then even into like after the fall of Rome, people came by to see this place. Yes, excellent there. Mm-hmm. Elon and Grayson, do you guys want to contribute to any of this here? How do you think the Nike of Samothrace has affected the art world? Also consider the video that y'all just looked at too. Some famous brand awareness. Mm-hmm. Definitely. And Eva, I haven't heard from you in a while. Do you have anything you want to add on here or in the chat box about the long-term effects of Nike? It's cool. Welcome back. Do you have anything you want to add here about the effect of Nike on the art world? We've hit on the brand, the cultural ideal, the symbolism. Maybe you can speak to how it was made. Yeah. that seems concise to me. We'll move on. And the last slide here for today is, how does this work impact you as an artist? We are actually all working in 3D this week. Does this have any effect on how you consider or how you look at 3D work? Mm-hmm. I think I will actually add something on here too that I feel inspired by today in the upper corner. And I'll speak a little bit to this one that I wrote, using pain to bring focus to my work. This is something that I've long understood as an artist, and maybe you guys feel it too. But we all have different kinds of emotional pain or turmoil that we go through in our life. It's just a part of living. But the artist who is clever with their time, actually uses that pain to put them into a state of focus. So imagine if you're feeling sad or angry, and when you get that sort of uncontrollable feeling, you immediately turn to your work or something that you're creating, and it just becomes the most intensely detailed thing. And the gift of that is it gives us focus. Right, Elizabeth, if you can do that once, then you can do it again, for sure. It's not only helps you in giving you a place to put those feelings, but it also, it's kind of a gift in itself. It gives you that focus. And there's a lot of artists, I work with many artists in the Richmond area who are still learning that lesson. They get so caught up in drama or feelings about other things, and they put them into angry phone calls or complaining and stuff like that, when they could instead just redirect it back to the work that they've been putting off. And those are those days that all of a sudden you're upset, you sit down, you start on something, and then you look up and 4 hours has passed, and finally this artwork is almost done, right? So that's what every time I see an ancient Hellenistic work, I think about the pain that the artist must have been going through, culturally on a huge level, but how something so beautiful ended up resulting from it. It's the process that we have of our emotions, but they can actually be a tool and sort of a source of energy. Sculpting something unique, ideas about using symbols, even borrowing ideals and symbols from previous works. Totally, like art is built off of one another. We all are inspired by each other's works. So definitely feel free to borrow, especially older meanings. It's always interesting to see what people interpret from them too. To give some background or meaning to your work, totally. I feel like every artwork should be meaningful in a way, and there should always be an opportunity to relate it back to us. And that's what people actually enjoy when they start buying your work. They want to see an artist's voice appear in all of their works, even the works they commission from you. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. And thank you guys so much for coming in today. It's been a great session. And let me turn off the recording real quick. I'll talk a little bit about what I said in the announcements yesterday.